glass walls of the Marshall Dynamics boardroom gleamed under the harsh Silicon Valley sunlight, reflecting a perfect view of the sprawling tech campus below. Inside, the air buzzed with tension 12 suits seated around a polished oak table, their murmured conversations dying out as the double doors swung open. Dr. Abigail Harper stepped in, her white coat swapped for a sharp navy blazer, her dark hair pulled back tight enough to mean business. In her hand, she gripped a sleek laptop, and trailing behind her was a tiny figure in a miniature suit, Liam, her 3-year-old son, clutching a stuffed dinosaur with one hand and her fingers with the other. Ethan Marshall, CEO and founder, sat at the head of the table, his charcoal suit pristine, his jaw tight. He'd been mid-sentence, gesturing at a projected graph of stock prices, when Abby's entrance stopped him cold. His hazel eyes flicked to her, then to Liam, and for a split second, something like recognition or panic flashed across his face. Beside him, Vivian Lee, his wife and the poised daughter of a venture capital titan, crossed her arms, her red lipstick a stark contrast to her cool, unreadable expression. "Abby," Ethan said, his voice low, almost a growl. "What the hell are you doing here?" The room went dead silent. A few board members shifted uncomfortably, their leather chairs creaking. Abby didn't flinch. She walked straight to the far end of the table, set her laptop down with a deliberate thunk, and turned to face the sea of suits. Liam stayed close, his big brown eyes scanning the room like he was sizing up a playground. "I'm here representing 18% of Marshall Dynamics' controlling interest," Abby said, her tone steady as steel. "Mine and my son's." A ripple of gasps and whispers broke the silence. Ethan's knuckles whitened as he gripped the edge of the table. Vivian's perfectly manicured nails tapped once, twice, on her armrest, a rare crack in her composure. "Excuse me?" Ethan snapped, standing now, his 6-foot frame casting a shadow over the projector screen. "You don't belong here. This is a private meeting." "Oh, I belong here," Abby shot back. She opened her laptop, fingers flying across the keys. "And I've got something you all need to see." The massive screen behind Ethan flickered, then lit up with a video. There was Liam, sitting at a cluttered desk in their Seattle apartment, surrounded by toy blocks and a whiteboard covered in scribbled equations. His little voice chirped through the speakers, clear and confident. "So, if you adjust the pressure valve here, it saves energy by 12%. See?" He pointed at a sketch of what looked like a turbine, then grinned at the camera, dimples flashing. The boardroom erupted. "What is this?" one gray-haired exec demanded, peering over his glasses. "Who's this kid?" another barked. Abby turned off the video, letting the silence settle like dust after a storm. She rested a hand on Liam's shoulder, her gaze locking with Ethan's. "This is Liam Harper," she said. "Age 3. IQ tested at 164. My son." She paused, letting the words hang heavy in the air. "Our son, Ethan." The chaos was instantaneous. Shouts overlapped, accusations, questions, disbelief. "That's impossible." A woman in a pinstripe suit yelled. "This is a stunt." Another growled. Ethan didn't move, didn't speak. His face had gone pale, like someone had sucked the air right out of him. Vivian leaned forward, her dark eyes narrowing as she studied Liam. Then Abby, then Ethan again. Quiet. The board chair, a stout man with a voice like gravel, banged his fist on the table. "Dr. Harper, explain yourself. Now." Abby took a breath, her heart pounding but her voice calm. 3 years ago, Ethan walked out on me and on Liam before he was even born. He chose this company, this merger, over us. But what he didn't know was that I've been building something too. With a little help, I've acquired 15% of Marshall Dynamics stock over the last 3 years. And yesterday, Clara Marshall, Ethan's mother, transferred her 3% to Liam. That makes us the largest single shareholders in this room. Ethan finally found his voice, hoarse and ragged. "You're lying. My mother would never." "She did." Abby cut in, pulling a folded document from her blazer pocket and sliding it across the table. "Signed and notarized. Check the timestamp." The chair snatched it up, scanning the pages as the room buzzed again. Ethan sank back into his chair, Running a hand through his hair, a nervous tick Abby remembered from late nights in their old Capitol Hill apartment. Back when he'd still laughed at her terrible coffee and kissed her goodnight. Vivian spoke for the first time, her voice smooth as silk but sharp enough to cut glass. Clever move, Dr. Harper. But what's your play here? You didn't fly down from Seattle just to show off your kid. Abby met her gaze, unflinching. I'm voting our shares in favor of your restructuring proposal, Vivian. The one that removes Ethan Marshall as CEO. The room exploded again. Ethan shot to his feet, slamming his hands on the table. You can't do this. This is my company. Not anymore, Abby said softly, almost sadly. She glanced at Liam, who'd climbed onto a chair and was now doodling on a notepad with a board member's pen. You made your choice 3 years ago, Ethan. You built an empire of glass and circuits. I built something stronger. Abby, wait, Ethan started, but she was already packing up her laptop. The chair was shouting for order. Board members were on their phones, and Vivian was watching it all with a faint, calculating smile. Dr. Harper, Vivian called as Abby headed for the door, Liam trailing behind with his dinosaur tucked under his arm. We should talk. Privately. Abby didn't turn around. My lawyer will handle it, she said over her shoulder. I've got a patient waiting back home. The doors swung shut behind her, muffling the chaos. In the hallway, the hum of Silicon Valley traffic filtered through the tinted windows. Liam tugged at her hand, looking up with those big, curious eyes that reminded her too much of Ethan and yet, somehow entirely of herself. Mommy, did we win? He asked, his voice small but steady. Abby knelt down, brushing a lock of dark hair from his forehead. Yeah, buddy. We did. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a text from Rachel back in Seattle. Clara's crashing. Get back now. Her stomach dropped. She scooped Liam up, his little arms wrapping around her neck, and bolted for the elevator. Whatever victory she'd just claimed, it came with a price and the clock was ticking. Back in the boardroom, Ethan stared at the closed doors, the weight of Abby's words sinking in like a slow bleed. Vivian leaned over, her voice a whisper in his ear. She's good, I'll give her that. But this isn't over. He didn't respond. All he could see was Liam's face on that screen, those dimples. That spark in the life he'd walked away from 3 years ago, now crashing back into his like a freight train. Abby hit the ground floor running, Liam giggling as she jostled him in her arms. The rental car was waiting outside, keys already in her hand. She buckled him into his car seat, her mind racing Clara, the hospital, the flight back to Seattle. She'd won this round, but the fight was far from over. And somewhere deep down, she knew Ethan wasn't going to let this go quietly. As she peeled out of the parking lot, the Silicon Valley skyline fading in her rearview mirror, Liam piped up from the back seat. Mommy, why was that man so mad? She gripped the steering wheel tighter, forcing a smile. Because he didn't expect us, buddy. But we've got bigger things to worry about now. Like saving Clara. Like keeping Liam safe. Like figuring out what Vivian Lee wanted from her and what Ethan might do next. Hey, what did you think of Abby's big moment? Can you guess how she got to this point or what Ethan's gonna do about it? Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below to let me know. We've got 9 more parts to unravel this story, and trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. The kitchen in their Capitol Hill apartment smelled like burnt toast and yesterday's coffee, a faint haze lingering from Abby's failed attempt at breakfast before her shift. She stood by the counter, still in her teal scrubs, her sneakers squeaking faintly against the hardwood floor. The pregnancy test sat there, 2 pink lines stark against the white plastic, glowing like a neon sign in the dim evening light filtering through the blinds. Abby's hands shook as she stared at it, a grin tugging at her lips despite the 12-hour shift still aching in her bones. She'd rushed home from Seattle Children's Hospital, barely stopping to ditch her stethoscope, just to tell Ethan the news. The front door clicked open, and there he was, Ethan Marshall, all sharp jawline and tired eyes, loosening his tie as he stepped inside. His briefcase hit the floor with a thud, and he ran a hand through his dark hair, that familiar tick Abby had loved since their med school days at UW. Back then, he'd been the dreamer, sketching tech startup ideas on napkins while she memorized anatomy charts. Now, he was the rising star of Marshall Dynamics, and she was the resident busting her ass to save tiny hearts. "Hey," she said, her voice bubbling with something she couldn't quite contain. She held up the test, practically bouncing on her toes. "Look at this." Ethan froze mid-step, his eyes locking on the stick. For a second, she thought she saw a flicker of a smile, something soft, something real. But then his face shifted, hardening like concrete setting in the rain. He dropped his gaze, shrugging off his jacket and tossing it over the couch. "Abby," he started, his tone clipped, "we need to talk." Her stomach flipped, but she pushed it down, stepping closer. "Yeah, we do. Ethan, this is huge. This is us, our baby." He wouldn't look at her. He walked past her to the fridge, pulling out a beer and popping the cap with a hiss that cut through the quiet. "The company's expanding," he said, his back to her, voice flat like he was reading a script. "We're moving operations to Silicon Valley next month." Abby blinked, the test slipping slightly in her grip. "Okay, so we'll move together. I can transfer my residency." "No." He turned then, finally meeting her eyes, and there was nothing there, no warmth, no spark, just a wall she didn't recognize. "There's no we in this, Abby. The board's approved a merger with Lee Ventures. I'm marrying Vivian Lee next month." The words hit like a punch to the gut, knocking the air out of her. She gripped the counter, the edge biting into her palms, steadying herself as the room tilted. "Vivian Lee?" she managed, her voice cracking. "The investor's daughter?" "Ethan, what are you talking about?" "It's business," he said, taking a swig of his beer like they were discussing the weather. "The merger needs this. It's the only way." "Business?" Her laugh was sharp, hollow, scraping her throat raw. "I'm standing here telling you I'm carrying your kid, and you're talking about business?" He set the bottle down, too hard, the clink echoing in the small space. "You'll be taken care of," he said, reaching for his briefcase. "The apartment's yours. I'll have my lawyers." "Your lawyers?" She stepped forward, close enough to smell his cologne, sandalwood, and something bitter now, not comforting like it used to be. "Look at me, Ethan. Look me in the eye and tell me the last 3 years meant nothing." He did, finally, and it was worse than she'd expected. His hazel eyes were empty, not cold, not angry, just gone. The man who'd proposed to her under the Space Needle 6 months ago, who'd laughed when she burned dinner and kissed her through the smoke, was nowhere in that stare. "I'm sorry," he said, the words mechanical like he'd practiced them in the mirror. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. "The accounts will be transferred by morning. Don't try to contact me." The door clicked shut, soft but final, like a scalpel slicing through tissue. Abby stood there, the pregnancy test still in her hand, its phantom beep ringing in her ears. Her phone buzzed on the counter, a text from Rachel. How'd he take it? Another buzz, a news alert. Marshall Dynamics announces merger with Lee Ventures CEO Ethan Marshall to wed Vivian Lee in Silicon Valley ceremony. Her knees buckled. She stumbled to the bathroom, barely making it to the toilet before the nausea hit, morning sickness or heartbreak. She couldn't tell. Kneeling on the cold tile, one hand pressed to her stomach, she felt the first kick of something new. Not just a baby, but a fire. Ethan might have walked out, but she wasn't alone. Not anymore. Her pager went off, hospital emergency surgery. She pushed herself up, splashed water on her face, and stared at her reflection in the chipped mirror. Red-rimmed eyes, messy hair, scrubs wrinkled from the day. She was Dr. Abigail Harper first, abandoned fiancée second. Her patients needed her. She grabbed her keys, then stopped by the counter. The test still lay there, those 2 pink lines, a promise and a challenge. She pocketed it, evidence of the night her life split in two. In the elevator, she typed back to Rachel, "He's gone. Tell you later." Heading to her now. The doors opened to the lobby, and she stepped out, shoulders squared, head high. 9 months to figure out how to do this alone. Right now, she had a kid's life to save. Her phone buzzed again as she reached her beat-up Honda, a system alert. Your access to the following accounts has been terminated. She deleted it without reading, sliding into the driver's seat. 12 hours left in her shift, a surgery to nail, a future to claw back from the wreckage Ethan left behind. Outside, the Seattle rain drummed against the windshield, a steady beat matching her pulse. She turned the key, the engine sputtering to life, and whispered to the tiny life inside her, "We're gonna be okay, little one. He doesn't get to decide who we are." Back in the apartment, the beer bottle sat untouched on the counter, a silent witness to the end of something and the start of something else entirely. The rain hadn't let up by morning, a gray curtain soaking Seattle as Abby stood outside the corner ATM on Pine Street, her hoodie plastered to her shoulders. She'd barely slept maybe an hour on the lumpy on-call room cot after stitching up a kid's ruptured appendix. Her fingers trembled as she punched in her PIN for the 4th time, the screen flashing the same gut punch message. Account access denied. She leaned her forehead against the cool metal of the machine, breath fogging in the damp air, exhaustion mixing with a rising tide of panic. Ethan hadn't just left. He'd taken everything. The joint savings she'd poured her residency checks into gone. The checking account they'd shared for rent and groceries empty. Even her personal savings, the one she'd set up before they met, somehow locked behind his name because he'd offered to manage it back when she trusted him with her life. Now she had a grand total of $47 in her wallet, a half tank of gas, and a baby on the way. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a text from Rachel. "You okay? Shifts over, meet me at the diner." Abby shoved it back, ignoring the sting in her eyes. She didn't have time to fall apart. Not yet. The diner smelled like greasy hash browns and burnt coffee, a fluorescent-lit refuge 2 blocks from the hospital. Rachel was already there, perched in a red vinyl booth, 2 mugs steaming in front of her. Her dark hair was still tied up from her own shift, her scrubs swapped for a Seahawks hoodie. She slid a coffee across as Abby slumped into the seat, the warmth seeping into her cold hands. "You look like hell," Rachel said, eyeing her over the rim of her mug. "What happened?" Abby stared at the coffee, the bitter smell turning her stomach. Morning sickness was kicking in hard. "He's gone," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "Left last night. Said he's marrying Vivian Lee for some merger. And he cleaned me out everything." Rachel's mug hit the table with a clatter. "He what? The joint accounts, sure, but your personal one too? How'd he even?" "He's on it," Abby cut in, rubbing her temples. "I let him handle the paperwork a year ago. Thought it'd be easier with my hours. Guess I was wrong." "That's illegal," Rachel said, her perfectly manicured nails tightening around her mug. "He can't touch your personal funds like that." "He did." Abby pulled out her phone, scrolling through a string of notifications, bank alerts, all time-stamped from 3 a.m. She slid it across the table. "And the apartment keys don't work either. Tried going home after my shift. Locks are changed." Rachel's jaw dropped as she skimmed the screen. "Jesus, Abby, where'd you sleep?" "On call room." She forced a sip of coffee, grimacing as it hit her like battery acid. Couldn't face crashing with anyone yet. Rachel leaned back, crossing her arms. "Okay, first off, you're staying with me. I've got the spare room since Jen moved out. Second, we're calling my cousin Mike. He's a lawyer, specializes in this kind of mess. Ethan doesn't get to pull this and walk away clean." Abby shook her head, the weight of it all pressing down. "I don't even know where to start. Ratch, I've got nothing left." "You've got me," Rachel said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "And you've got that kid in there." She nodded at Abby's stomach. "He doesn't get to take that from you." Her phone buzzed again. Clara Marshall, Ethan's mom, calling for the 3rd time since dawn. Abby declined it, her thumb hovering over the block button. "That's her again," she muttered. "Probably damage control." Or she didn't know, Rachel suggested, softer now. "You seen the news?" Abby hadn't. Rachel pulled up a headline on her phone. Marshall Dynamics CEO spotted in Silicon Valley with fiancée Vivian Lee. The photo showed Ethan in a crisp suit, Vivian's hand on his arm, stepping out of a sleek restaurant. The timestamp hit like a brick 3 days ago. He'd decided this before she told him about the baby. A nurse burst through the diner door, still in scrubs, scanning the room. "Dr. Harper," she called, spotting them. "Your patient from last night, the appendectomy, she's crashing." Abby was on her feet before the words sank in. Coffee abandoned. Page Dr. Reynolds for backup, she said, already moving. I'll be there in 2 minutes. Rachel grabbed her arm as she passed. We'll figure this out. Okay? After shift, you're coming home with me. Lives to save first, Abby said, managing a tight smile. Life to rebuild second. The hospital was a blur of white coats and beeping monitors. Abby scrubbed in, her mind splitting between the patient, a 6-year-old girl with a fever spiking too fast, and the wreckage Ethan had left behind. She pushed it down, focusing on the scalpel in her hand, the steady rhythm of her team. For hours later, the girl was stable, her parents sobbing with relief outside the OR. Abby peeled off her gloves, her legs shaking as she sank onto a bench in the locker room. Rachel found her there, a power bar in hand. Each she ordered, tossing it over. Morning sickness or not, you're running on fumes. Abby unwrapped it, taking a reluctant bite. Thanks, she said, voice thick. For everything. Don't you dare thank me, Rachel warned, sitting beside her. Just promise me one thing. Anything. When you're back on your feet, and you will be, we make him regret ever hearing the name Abigail Harper. Abby's pager buzzed another emergency. She wiped her eyes, squared her shoulders, and stood. Deal, she said, already heading for the OR. But first, I've got work to do. Outside, the rain kept falling, washing the city clean. Inside, Abby kept moving, one step at a time, building something Ethan couldn't touch, not yet. What do you think of Abby's fight to hold it together? Can she really rebuild after this? Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment with your thoughts. I'd love to hear how you see this playing out. Part 4's coming soon, and it's a wild one. The OR lights buzzed overhead, harsh and unrelenting, as Abby stood elbow deep in a 6-year-old's chest cavity, her gloved hands steady despite the ache in her back. She was 39 weeks pregnant, technically on maternity leave, but she'd come in for a consult when the call came. A kid with a rare cardiac defect, crashing fast. Now, sweat beaded under her cap, her belly pressing against the table edge, and a monitor beeped a warning rhythm she couldn't ignore. BP's spiking, Dr. Harper, Dr. Martinez said, his voice tight behind his mask. We need to. I know what my BP's doing. Abby snapped, her fingers deftly threading a suture around the tiny, fluttering heart. I'm not leaving this or until this kid's stable. Across the table, Rachel adjusted the retractors, her eyes flicking to Abby's face. You're nuts, you know that? Let me take over. Almost done, Abby insisted, her focus laser sharp despite the contraction ripping through her like a freight train. Just need to there. She tied off the last stitch, stepping back as the heart rate on the monitor steadied, a normal sinus rhythm kicking in. Patient stable, the anesthesiologist confirmed, relief washing through the room. Abby exhaled, peeling her hands out of the chest. Close for me, Ratch. I think another contraction hit, doubling her over. I think I'm in labor. What happened next was a blur of motion. Someone yanked off her gown. Someone else wheeled in a gurney, and Rachel was barking orders like a drill sergeant. Get her to LD now. Abby barely registered the cold steel under her as they rolled her out. Her scrubs swapped for a hospital gown in record time. Through it all, she kept muttering, the patient, how's the patient? She's fine, Rachel said, jogging alongside the gurney, her hand gripping Abby's. You saved her. Now focus on your own kid for once. 14 hours later, Liam Harper came screaming into the world, his healthy lungs echoing through the delivery room at Seattle Children's. Abby lay back, drenched in sweat, her dark hair plastered to her forehead as the nurse placed him in her arms. He was tiny, 6 pounds, even with a mop of dark curls and a grip that latched onto her finger like he already knew who she was. She traced his face, memorizing every detail. The sharp little chin, the wide brown eyes, the way his nose scrunched when he yawned. He looks like him, she whispered, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Rachel, perched on a stool beside her, shook her head. Nah, he looks like you, strong, stubborn, already proving people wrong by showing up mid-surgery. A knock at the door made them both tense. A nurse stepped in, balancing a massive bouquet of lilies and daisies, the kind that screamed money. These came for you, Dr. Harper, she said, setting them by the window. The The card was simple, handwritten. Congratulations, Abby Clara. How'd she know? Abby started, her voice hoarse from hours of labor. Hospital gossip travels fast. Rachel sighed, peering at the flowers. Want me to toss em? Abby stared at them, then at Liam, his little chest rising and falling against her. No, she said finally. Put them by the window. She's his grandma, whatever else she is. Dr. Martinez poked his head in, still in scrubs from the oar. Your patient's doing great, perfect recovery. Parents want to thank you. Tell them Dr. Harper's recovering from saving their kid while popping out her own. Rachel announced, grinning wide. She's a damn legend. Abby barely heard them, lost in Liam's face. He had Ethan's chin, sure, but those eyes, they were hers, fierce and bright. Hey, little man, she whispered, brushing a tear off his cheek, hers or his. She couldn't tell. We're gonna be okay. Her phone lit up on the bedside table, a news alert. Marshall Dynamics opens Silicon Valley HQ. She glanced at the flowers, then back at Liam, two paths splitting right there in that hospital room. One to bitterness, the other to something stronger. A resident interrupted, hovering at the door. Dr. Harper, sorry to bug you, but we've got to consult. She just gave birth. Rachel snapped, but Abby laughed, surprising herself. It's fine, she said, shifting Liam in her arms. Tell me about the case. The resident blinked, then launched in. 4-year-old, congenital defect, needs a workup. Start it, Abby cut in. I'll review tomorrow. Tomorrow? Rachel exclaimed. Abby, you can't. Wheelchair rounds if I have to, she said, smiling down at Liam as he yawned. Right, little one? He cooed, and for the first time since Ethan walked out, Abby felt its certainty, bone deep and unshakable. They weren't just going to be okay. They were going to be unstoppable. Outside, the Seattle skyline glittered through the hospital window, rain-streaked and glowing. The lilies caught the light, their scent mixing with the sterile tang of antiseptic. Abby didn't know it yet, but those flowers were Clara's first step, a bridge she'd build quietly, brick by brick, while Ethan chased his empire 1,000 miles away. Back in Silicon Valley, Ethan sat in his new office, a glass-walled penthouse overlooking the tech sprawl. The news ticker on his screen blared the HQ opening, but his phone buzzed with a text from his assistant. Clara sent flowers to Seattle. Hospital delivery. He stared at it, something twisting in his chest, then swiped it away. He had a merger to celebrate, a wedding to plan. Whatever Abby was doing, it didn't matter. Not anymore. Or so he thought. The courtroom smelled like old wood and stale coffee. A stuffy little chamber tucked into Seattle's King County Courthouse. Abby sat at the defendant's table, her hands folded tight to hide the tremble. Her navy blazer swapped for a borrowed gray suit from Rachel's closet. Across the aisle, Ethan stood with his lawyers, 3 of them. All slick suits and sharper smirks, his tie a bold red slash against his crisp white shirt. He hadn't looked at her yet, his hazel eyes fixed on the judge's bench, but she could feel the weight of him, heavy as the past 2 years. It was late summer, Liam just shy of 2, and Abby had spent those years clawing her way back. With Rachel's help and her cousin Mike's legal hustle, she'd recovered her personal savings barely after months of battles over Ethan's shady withdrawals. She'd moved into Rachel's spare room, then a tiny 1-bedroom near the hospital, pouring every spare dime into a quiet plan. Buying Marshall Dynamics stock through shell companies Mike set up. Started small, a few shares here, a block there, until she hit 15%, all hidden behind layers Ethan wouldn't think to look at. Clara had been her silent partner, feeding her tips from Boston, a lifeline Abby hadn't expected. But Ethan had found out. Somehow, some leak, maybe a board mole, maybe a bank slip, he'd traced the shares back to her. Now here they were, him suing her for fraud, claiming she'd manipulated stock records to undermine his company. If he won, she'd lose it all. The shares, her savings, maybe even her medical license if his lawyers spun it right. The judge, a wiry woman with steel gray hair, banged her gavel. Order. Mr. Marshall, your opening statement. Ethan's lead lawyer, a guy with a Rolex and a voice like gravel, stepped up. Your Honor, Dr. Abigail Harper has engaged in a calculated scheme to destabilize Marshall Dynamics. She's acquired 15% of our client's company through deceptive means, shell companies, falsified documents, all to retaliate against Mr. Marshall for personal grievances. We're asking for a full seizure of her holdings and damages. Abby's stomach twisted. Mike, lean and scruffy in a suit 2 sizes too big, squeezed her arm under the table. He's bluffing, he whispered. They've got no proof. Doesn't matter, she muttered back. He's got money and a story. I've got a toddler and a prayer. Her phone buzzed in her bag, a photo from Rachel. Liam at daycare, grinning with a crayon-streaked face, oblivious to the storm his mom was weathering. She clung to that image as her anchor. Mike stood for their turn, clearing his throat. Your Honor, my client's acquisitions were legal, transparent to the SEC, and funded with her own income. Mr. Marshall's alleging fraud because he can't handle a woman outsmarting him at his own game. We've got receipts, every transaction, every dollar. The judge nodded, scribbling notes, but Ethan finally looked at her then, his gaze cutting through the room. You think you can beat me at this, Abby? He said, loud enough for the gallery to hear. This is my world. She met his stare, her voice low but steady. I'm not beating you, Ethan. I'm protecting my son, our son. A murmur rippled through the sparse crowd, reporters, mostly, sniffing a scandal. The judge banged her gavel again. Enough. Evidence, counsel. The next hour was a slog of documents and legalese. Ethan's team flashing glossy charts while Mike countered with dog-eared printouts. Abby's mind drifted to Liam, his first steps in Rachel's living room, his babbling about heart fixes when she studied late. She'd kept him away from this, from Ethan, but now it felt like the walls were closing in. Then came the bomb. Ethan's lawyer slid a photo across the table, a grainy shot of Abby meeting Clara at a Boston cafe last year. Liam in a stroller beside them. Proof of collusion, he declared. Clara Marshall, the defendant's mother-in-law, fed her insider info to manipulate stock prices. Abby's heart sank. Clara had been careful, discreet calls, coded emails, but this? She'd never thought they'd be tailed. Mike objected, voice rising, but the judge waved him down. I'll allow it. Dr. Harper, care to explain? She stood, knees shaky but chin up. Clara's my son's grandmother. We met to talk about him, not stocks. She gave me advice, sure same as she gave Ethan his whole life. If that's collusion, then half this room's guilty of talking to their moms. A few chuckles broke the tension, but Ethan's glare didn't waver. You're using my own mother against me, he said, venom dripping. That's low even for you. She chose Liam, Abby shot back. You chose Silicon Valley. The judge called a recess, and Abby slipped out to the hallway, her breath hitching. Liam's daycare was a block away. She could see him through the window, doodling on construction paper, his tiny hands smudged with red marker. She pressed a hand to her stomach, the ghost of those early kicks haunting her. If Ethan won, he'd take the shares, maybe dig deeper. Could he go for custody? The thought iced her veins. Rachel found her there, 2 coffee cups in hand. Heard it's a shit show in there, she said, passing one over. You holding up? Barely, Abby admitted, sipping the coffee black, bitter, grounding. He's got photos, Ratch. Me and Clara. They're painting me as some mastermind. Rachel snorted. You're a surgeon, not a Bond villain. Michael handle it. He better, Abby said, glancing back at Liam through the glass. Because if he doesn't, I'm screwed and so's he. Back inside, the hearing stretched into the afternoon. Ethan's team piled on bank records, emails twisted out of context while Mike fought tooth and nail, his voice hoarse by the end. The judge finally leaned forward, peering over her glasses. I'll review the evidence. Ruling next week. Courts adjourned. Ethan lingered as the room cleared, his lawyers whispering in his ear. He caught Abby's eye, stepping closer, his voice low. This isn't over, Abby. You're playing a game you can't win. She didn't flinch. I'm not playing, Ethan. I'm surviving. You should have thought about that before you burned us. He opened his mouth, then shut it, turning on his heel and stalking out. Abby watched him go, her hands curling into fists. She'd bought time, maybe, But the threat loomed larger now. Ethan wasn't just after her money. He was after her life, her son, everything she'd built from the ashes he'd left. Outside, the Seattle sun peeked through the clouds, a rare break in the gloom. Abby picked Liam up from daycare, his little arms wrapping around her neck as he babbled about dinosaurs. She held him tight, the weight of him her only steady thing in a world tilting off its axis. Whoa, talk about a nail-biter. What do you think? Can Abby outsmart Ethan's legal attack? Subscribe and drop a comment with your predictions. I'm dying to know what you're rooting for. Now let's continue. The oncology ward at Seattle Children's was quiet, save for the soft hum of monitors and the occasional shuffle of nurses' shoes. Abby stood outside Clara Marshall's private room, her white coat wrinkled from a double shift, her hands shoved deep in her pockets. It was late past visiting hours, but she'd gotten the call an hour ago. Clara was fading fast. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4, diagnosed too late to fight. Abby hadn't seen it coming. Clara had hidden it well, her voice steady on their weekly calls, her gifts for Liam arriving like clockwork. Inside, the room was dim, lit only by a bedside lamp casting a warm glow over Clara's frail frame. She looked smaller than Abby remembered, her silver hair thin against the pillow, her hands resting on a quilt stitched with tiny sailboats, a relic from Ethan's childhood. Maybe. Liam sat beside her, cross-legged on a chair, holding her hand with both of his. At 3, he was already too perceptive, his big brown eyes tracking the 4 lines snaking up her arm. "Grandma, you tired?" he asked, his voice small but clear. Clara managed a smile, weak but real. "A little, sweetheart. But I'm glad you're here." Abby stepped in, her throat tight. "Hey Clara," she said, pulling up a stool. "How you holding up?" Clara's eyes, still sharp despite the morphine, met hers. "I wondered who'd tell you first," she said, her Boston accent softening the words. "Guess it's me. Rachel got the labs an hour ago," Abby said, checking the monitor automatically. "Habit, even now. Why didn't you say anything?" "Didn't want pity," Clara replied, her gaze drifting to Liam. "Wanted to see this one while I still could." Liam tilted his head, squeezing her hand. "Grandma, you gonna get better?" Clara's breath hitched, and Abby's heart clenched. "Not this time, buddy," Clara said gently. "But I've got something for you. Okay?" She nodded at a small wooden box on the nightstand, worn, carved with initials Abby didn't recognize. Abby opened it, revealing a USB drive nestled among a tangle of old photos and a single toy car, rusted from years. A folded letter sat on top, Clara's shaky handwriting scrawled across it. "For Abby, Liam." "What's this?" Abby asked, holding up the drive. Clara's smile turned sly, a flicker of the woman who'd raised Ethan. "Proof," she said. "Everything Ethan didn't want you to know." Before Abby could press, Rachel slipped in, her face grim. "Her numbers dropped 20 minutes ago. Thought we'd lose her. She's stable now, but..." "How long?" Abby asked, her voice barely audible. "Weeks, maybe," Rachel said, glancing at Clara. "She's asking for you as her doctor." Abby laughed, hollow and sharp. "I'm pediatric surgery, not oncology." "She needs you," Rachel cut in, her tone firm. "And you know why." Abby did. Those weekly FaceTime calls, Clara teaching Liam to count in French, sending him science kits, slipping Abby stock tips disguised as family advice. They built something Ethan couldn't touch. While he burned bridges, Clara had laid foundations. "Go," Clara said, her voice fading. "You've got a surgery. Bring Liam back tomorrow." Abby hesitated, then squeezed Clara's hand, bony, cold, but still strong. "I will," she said. "Rest. Okay?" Clara's eyes fluttered shut, and Abby scooped Liam up, his dinosaur toy dangling from his grip. "Bye, Grandma," he chirped, waving as they left. Back home, in their cramped Queen Anne apartment, Abby tucked Liam into bed, his curls splayed across the pillow. She waited until his breathing evened out, then plugged the USB into her laptop. Files spilled across the screen: merger contracts, stock transfers, emails. Her pulse quickened as she read. Ethan had backdated his marriage license with Vivian, fudged the merger timeline, siphoned funds to seal the deal all months before he'd left her. He hadn't just abandoned them, he'd broken laws to do it. The letter was next. She unfolded it, Clara's words spilling out in jagged ink. Dearest Abby, by now, the board meeting's over. I hope you showed them our boy's brilliant mind. This drive is my last gift. Proof Ethan threw away not just love, but legacy. Use it wisely, not for revenge, but for Liam. He'll need protection from the storm coming to Marshall Dynamics. Love him enough for all of us. Clara. Abby's hands shook as she closed the laptop. Clara hadn't just given her ammo, she'd handed her a shield. And then, a text from Rachel. Clara transferred her 3% stake to Liam yesterday. All legal. It's done. She sank onto the couch, the weight of it crashing over her. 18%. Her and Liam, together, now held 18% of Ethan's empire, enough to tip the scales. Her phone buzzed again. Vivian Lee, calling for the third time that week. Abby let it ring, her mind racing. Vivian wanted an ally, Clara wanted justice. And Ethan? He had no idea what was coming. The next morning, she brought Liam back to Clara's room. He climbed onto the bed, chattering about a dinosaur book Clara had sent, while Abby watched from the doorway. Singapore, Clara murmured suddenly, her eyes half open. Yeah, Abby said, stepping closer. Vivian called again. She's pushing for me to come. Clara's hand found Liam's, her grip weak but sure. This time he learned, she said. Learned what, Grandma? Liam asked, innocent and bright. That the biggest mistakes come with the biggest prices. Clara whispered, her voice fading into a smile. Abby's phone buzzed. Her travel agent. First-class tickets to Silicon Valley confirmed. She looked at Liam, then Clara, a cold certainty settling in her gut. Ethan hadn't just left them 3 years ago. He'd left his whole damn future, and Clara's legacy was about to make him pay. That night, Clara slipped away, an hour before Abby's shift ended. Rachel found her in the lounge, eyes red, clutching the wooden box. Liam was with her, Rachel said softly, held her hand till the end. Abby nodded, tears spilling over. She gave us everything, she said, voice breaking. And now it's up to me. Dewey Day La Fan 7. The Showdown Qua Ka Chuyen Echoes of Resilience. Dai Koang 2502. Viet Bang Tiang on my Voiv and Fong Tu Nien. Gong Gue. Fan on Van Hoa Hoa Kai. Fan Nai La Diem Chow Treo Thursday Ba. Mot Su Kien Kich Tin Dua Ka Trien Len Din Diem Voi Mu Ta Chi Teep. Hoi Thoai Tsong Tang Va Cam Suk Man Mi. Dung Theo Ka Truck Storytelling. Part 7. The Showdown. The Silicon Valley air was dry and sharp as Abby stepped out of the rental car, Liam's small hand warm in hers. The Marshall Dynamics headquarters loomed ahead, a sleek tower of glass and steel, its logo glinting in the late afternoon sun. She'd flown in that morning, first-class tickets clutched like a lifeline. Her laptop bag slung over her shoulder with Clara's USB burning a hole in it. Liam, in a tiny blazer Rachel had insisted he wear, clutched his dinosaur toy, his big eyes taking in the bustle of suits streaming through the lobby. Mommy, is this where the madman works? He asked, his voice cutting through the hum of traffic. Abby managed a tight smile, smoothing his curls. Yeah, buddy, but we're here to fix things. Okay? Inside, the boardroom was a cathedral of corporate power, floor-to-ceiling windows, a long oak table, and 12 board members in tailored suits, their faces a mix of curiosity and irritation. Ethan sat at the head, his charcoal suit pristine, his jaw set like he'd been carved from stone. Vivian Lee flanked him, her red dress a bold splash against the muted tones, her dark eyes tracking Abby's every move. The air crackled with tension, the kind that made your skin itch. Dr. Harper, the board chair, a stout man with a gravelly voice, called as she entered. You're late. Flight delay, Abby said, setting her laptop down at the far end. But I'm here now, representing 18% of Marshall Dynamics' controlling interest, mine and my son's. A ripple of murmurs broke out. Ethan's knuckles whitened on the table's edge, his hazel eyes narrowing. This is absurd, he snapped, standing. She has no right. She does, Vivian cut in, her voice smooth and sharp. The shares are verified. Sit down, Ethan. He glared at her but sank back, the room's attention shifting to Abby. She took a breath, her heart pounding against her ribs, and opened her laptop. Before we vote on the restructuring, I've got something you need to see. The screen behind Ethan flickered to life, projecting a video. Liam appeared 3 years old, sitting at their Seattle kitchen table, a whiteboard scribbled with equations beside him. If you tweak the valve here, his little voice chirped, pointing at a sketch, it saves power by 12%. Easy. He grinned, dimples flashing, and the room went dead silent. What the hell is this? A gray-haired exec barked, peering over his glasses. This, Abby said, resting a hand on Liam's shoulder as he climbed onto a chair beside her, is Liam Harper. Age 3. IQ 164. My son. She paused, her gaze locking with Ethan's across the table. Our son. The boardroom erupted. Shouts overlapped, disbelief, accusations, chaos. This is a stunt. One woman yelled. Prove it. Another demanded. Ethan didn't move, his face draining of color, his hands gripping the table like it was the only thing keeping him upright. Vivian leaned forward, her lips parting slightly, studying Liam with a flicker of something surprise, maybe, or calculation. Quiet. The chair banged his fist, the sound echoing off the glass. Dr. Harper, explain. Abby steadied herself, her voice calm but firm. 3 years ago, Ethan walked out on us before Liam was born for this merger, this company. I've spent every day since building something better. With Clara Marshall's help, I've acquired 15% of your stock. Yesterday, she transferred her 3% to Liam. That's 18%. And I'm voting it all for Vivian's restructuring plan, starting with removing Ethan Marshall as CEO. The room exploded again. Ethan shot to his feet, slamming his hands down. You can't do this. This is my company, my life. Not anymore, Abby said, her tone soft but cutting. She slid Clara's USB across the table. And this? Proof you broke laws to get here, backdated contracts, illegal transfers, all to lock in the merger with Vivian. Clara kept it all. Ethan lunged for the drive, but the chair snatched it first, plugging it into his own laptop. Files flashed up, emails, documents, timestamps, each one a nail in Ethan's coffin. This is real, the chair muttered, his face darkening. Marshall, you've got some explaining to do. Ethan stammered, his voice cracking. This is a setup, she's lying. No lies, Abby said, closing her laptop with a snap. Just the truth you ran from. Vivian stood, her heels clicking as she rounded the table. Dr. Harper, she called, her tone clipped but intrigued. A word? My lawyer will handle it, Abby replied, already turning for the door. I've got a patient waiting. Abby, wait, Ethan started, his voice raw, but she didn't stop. Liam trailed her, waving at the stunned board with his dinosaur in hand. Bye-bye, he chirped, and a few choked laughs broke the tension. The hallway was a blur, elevators, security badges, the rental car waiting outside. Abby buckled Liam in, her hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. Her phone buzzed. Rachel. Clara's crashing. Get back now. Her chest tightened, the victory souring fast. She floored it to the airport, Liam humming softly in the back seat, oblivious to the storm. Back in the boardroom, Ethan sank into his chair, the USB's contents still glowing on the screen. Vivian leaned over, her breath warm against his ear. She's good, she whispered. But we're not done. He didn't answer, his eyes fixed on the door where Abby and Liam had disappeared. That grin, those dimples, his own face staring back at him. A ghost he couldn't shake. The flight back to Seattle was a red-eye, Liam asleep against her shoulder, his dinosaur clutched tight. Abby stared out the window, the city lights below a distant blur. She'd won, Ethan was out, the board in chaos, but Clara's text haunted her. It's time he learned. Learned what? The price of his choices. The son he'd lost? She landed at SeaTac an hour too late. Rachel met her at the hospital, eyes red, voice quiet. She's gone, Abby. Liam was with her till the end, held her hand. Abby's knees buckled, Rachel catching her before she hit the floor. She left this, Rachel said, handing over the wooden box, Clara's letter and USB inside. A final gift. Abby clutched it, tears streaming down her face. She gave us everything, she whispered. And I wasn't here. You were fighting, Rachel said, pulling her into a hug. She'd be proud. Liam toddled over, sleepy but alert, wrapping his arms around her legs. "Mommy," Grandma said bye-bye, he mumbled, and Abby broke, sobbing into his curls. The victory in Silicon Valley felt hollow now, but Clara's legacy wasn't just the shares or the proof, it was Liam. This brilliant, beautiful boy Ethan would never know. And Abby? She'd make damn sure that legacy lasted. The Silicon Valley air was dry and sharp as Abby stepped out of the rental car, Liam's small hand warm in hers. The Marshall Dynamics headquarters loomed ahead, a sleek tower of glass and steel, its logo glinting in the late afternoon sun. She'd flown in that morning, first-class tickets clutched like a lifeline. Her laptop bag slung over her shoulder with Clara's USB burning a hole in it. Liam, in a tiny blazer Rachel had insisted he wear, clutched his dinosaur toy, his big eyes taking in the bustle of suits streaming through the lobby. "Mommy, is this where the madman works?" he asked, his voice cutting through the hum of traffic. Abby managed a tight smile, smoothing his curls. "Yeah, buddy, but we're here to fix things. Okay?" Inside, the boardroom was a cathedral of corporate power, floor-to-ceiling windows, a long oak table, and 12 board members in tailored suits, their faces a mix of curiosity and irritation. Ethan sat at the head, his charcoal suit pristine, his jaw set like he'd been carved from stone. Vivian Lee flanked him, her red dress a bold splash against the muted tones, her dark eyes tracking Abby's every move. The air crackled with tension, the kind that made your skin itch. Dr. Harper, the board chair, a stout man with a gravelly voice, called as she entered. "You're late. Flight delay," Abby said, setting her laptop down at the far end. "But I'm here now, representing 18% of Marshall Dynamics' controlling interest, mine and my son's." A ripple of murmurs broke out. Ethan's knuckles whitened on the table's edge, his hazel eyes narrowing. "This is absurd," he snapped, standing. "She has no right." "She does," Vivian cut in, her voice smooth and sharp. "The shares are verified. Sit down, Ethan." He glared at her but sank back, the room's attention shifting to Abby. She took a breath, her heart pounding against her ribs, and opened her laptop. "Before we vote on the restructuring, I've got something you need to see." The screen behind Ethan flickered to life, projecting a video. Liam appeared 3 years old, sitting at their Seattle kitchen table, a whiteboard scribbled with equations beside him. "If you tweak the valve here," his little voice chirped, pointing at a sketch, "it saves power by 12%. Easy." He grinned, dimples flashing, and the room went dead silent. "What the hell is this?" a gray-haired exec barked, peering over his glasses. "This," Abby said, resting a hand on Liam's shoulder as he climbed onto a chair beside her, "is Liam Harper. Age 3. IQ 164. My son." She paused, her gaze locking with Ethan's across the table. "Our son." The boardroom erupted. Shouts overlapped, disbelief, accusations, chaos. "This is a stunt," one woman yelled. "Prove it," another demanded. Ethan didn't move, his face draining of color, his hands gripping the table like it was the only thing keeping him upright. Vivian leaned forward, her lips parting slightly, studying Liam with a flicker of something: surprise, maybe, or calculation. "Quiet." The chair banged his fist, the sound echoing off the glass. "Dr. Harper, explain." Abby steadied herself, her voice calm but firm. 3 years ago, Ethan walked out on us before Liam was born for this merger, this company. I've spent every day since building something better. With Clara Marshall's help, I've acquired 15% of your stock. Yesterday, she transferred her 3% to Liam. That's 18%. And I'm voting it all for Vivian's restructuring plan, starting with removing Ethan Marshall as CEO. The room exploded again. Ethan shot to his feet, slamming his hands down. "You can't do this. This is my company, my life." "Not anymore," Abby said, her tone soft but cutting. She slid Clara's USB across the table. "And this? Proof you broke laws to get here, backdated contracts, illegal transfers, all to lock in the merger with Vivian." Clara kept it all. Ethan lunged for the drive, but the chair snatched it first, plugging it into his own laptop. Files flashed up: emails, documents, timestamps, each one a nail in Ethan's coffin. "This is real," the chair muttered, his face darkening. "Marshall, you've got some explaining to do." Ethan stammered, his voice cracking. "This is a setup, she's lying." "No lies," Abby said, closing her laptop with a snap. "Just the truth you ran from." Vivian stood, her heels clicking as she rounded the table. "Dr. Harper," she called, her tone clipped but intrigued. "A word?" "My lawyer will handle it," Abby replied, already turning for the door. "I've got a patient waiting." "Abby, wait," Ethan started, his voice raw, but she didn't stop. Liam trailed her, waving at the stunned board with his dinosaur in hand. "Bye-bye," he chirped, and a few choked laughs broke the tension. The hallway was a blur: elevators, security badges, the rental car waiting outside. Abby buckled Liam in, her hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. Her phone buzzed. "Rachel. Clara's crashing. Get back now." Her chest tightened, the victory souring fast. She floored it to the airport, Liam humming softly in the back seat, oblivious to the storm. Back in the boardroom, Ethan sank into his chair, the USB's contents still glowing on the screen. Vivian leaned over, her breath warm against his ear. "She's good," she whispered. "But we're not done." He didn't answer, his eyes fixed on the door where Abby and Liam had disappeared. That grin, those dimples, his own face staring back at him. A ghost he couldn't shake. The flight back to Seattle was a red-eye, Liam asleep against her shoulder, his dinosaur clutched tight. Abby stared out the window, the city lights below a distant blur. She'd won. Ethan was out, the board in chaos, but Clara's text haunted her. It's time he learned. Learned what? The price of his choices. The son he'd lost? She landed at SeaTac an hour too late. Rachel met her at the hospital, eyes red, voice quiet. "She's gone, Abby." Liam was with her till the end, held her hand. Abby's knees buckled, Rachel catching her before she hit the floor. "She left this," Rachel said, handing over the wooden box, Clara's letter and USB inside. A final gift. Abby clutched it, tears streaming down her face. "She gave us everything," she whispered. "And I wasn't here." "You were fighting," Rachel said, pulling her into a hug. "She'd be proud." Liam toddled over, sleepy but alert, wrapping his arms around her legs. "Mommy, Grandma said bye-bye," he mumbled, and Abby broke, sobbing into his curls. The victory in Silicon Valley felt hollow now, but Clara's legacy wasn't just the shares or the proof, it was Liam. This brilliant, beautiful boy Ethan would never know. And Abby? She'd make damn sure that legacy lasted. Holy smokes, what a showdown. Did Abby just turn the tables or what? How do you feel about Clara's last move? Subscribe and drop a comment, I'm dying to hear your take. Part 8's up next, and Ethan's not going down without a fight. The hospital lobby smelled like bleach and wilted flowers. The late afternoon lights slanting through the windows and glinting off the fish tank Liam loved so much. Abby stood by the reception desk, her white coat swapped for a hoodie after a grueling shift, 2 surgeries. One a close call with a preemie's heart. She was bone-tired, her dark hair escaping its ponytail. When the clerk waved her over, voice low. "Dr. Harper, there's a guy in the waiting area. Says he's not leaving till he sees you." Her stomach dropped. She didn't need to ask who. 3 weeks had passed since Clara's funeral, since the boardroom blowout in Silicon Valley. Marshall Dynamics was crumbling, bankruptcy filings splashed across the news. Ethan's name a punchline in tech circles. She'd avoided his calls, blocked his number, but deep down, she'd known he'd show up eventually. She rounded the corner and there he was, Ethan Marshall, slouched in a plastic chair by the tank, watching the fish dart between neon coral. No designer suit this time, just a wrinkled button down, sleeves rolled up, his hair a mess like he'd raked his hands through it too many times. He looked older, hollowed out, the arrogance she'd once known replaced by something raw and unsteady. In his lap, he clutched a thick envelope, his knuckles white around it. "Security's on their way," she said by way of greeting, crossing her arms. "You've got 2 minutes. He stood, too fast, the chair scraping against the tile. "Abby, please. I'm not here to fight." "Then why are you here?" Her voice was steel, cutting through the hum of the lobby. You lost, Ethan. The company's gone. Go back to Vivian. It's not about that. He took a step closer, and she stiffened, the space between them electric with history. It's about him, Liam. I need to see him. Her laugh was sharp, bitter, bouncing off the walls. No, you don't get to waltz in here after 3 years and play dad. I'm not playing, he said, his voice breaking. I screwed up everything. The merger, leaving you, all of it. I just want a chance to. You had your chance. She cut in, stepping forward now, close enough to see the shadows under his eyes. The night you walked out, chose a boardroom over your kid. He's mine, Ethan. You don't get to claim him now that your world's falling apart. He flinched, but held up the envelope. This is from Mom. Her lawyers released it after the funeral for Liam. She wanted him to have it. Abby's breath caught. She took it, careful not to touch his fingers, the paper heavy in her hands. That's all? She asked, eyes narrowing. No. He pulled another envelope from his pocket, smaller, creased like he'd carried it too long. This is mine. A letter for him when he's older. Please, Abby. You don't have to give it to him now. Just keep it. She stared at it, then at him, the man who'd once been her everything now reduced to this pleading, broken, a shadow of the Ethan she'd loved. Why should I? She said, her voice low, dangerous. You think a letter fixes this? He's for Ethan. He's already smarter than your best engineers built a damn circuit board from a toy set last week. You don't deserve to know him. Pain flashed across his face, deep and real, and for a second, she almost felt it too. I know, he said, barely audible. I know I don't. But he's my son too. No, she snapped, the word a blade. He's mine. Like mother, like son, I'm the one who stayed. You lost that right the night you picked a merger over us. He opened his mouth, but the lobby doors slid open. 2 security guards striding in big guys, badges glinting. Dr. Harper, one called, this him? Yeah, she said, nodding. Get him out. Wait, Ethan started, stepping toward her, but the guards flanked him, hands on his arms. Abby, please. Goodbye, Ethan, she said, turning away, the envelopes burning in her grip. She didn't look back as they escorted him out, his protests fading into the hum of the hospital. The fish tank bubbled softly, a clownfish darting through the coral, and she pressed a hand to her chest, steadying her breath. Later that night, after Liam was asleep in their queen and apartment, Abby sat on the couch, the envelopes on the coffee table like unexploded bombs. She opened Clara's first, her fingers trembling as she unfolded the pages, a trust fund for Liam's education, set up years ago, and a note in Clara's shaky hand. For my grandson, the brightest star I ever knew. Love him well, Abby. The tears came then, hot and fast, dripping onto the paper. She swiped them away, reaching for Ethan's letter next. It was shorter, Messier. Ink smudged like he'd written it in a rush. Liam, I'm your dad, and I failed you before you were born. I chose wrong money, power, things that don't matter now. Your mom's the strongest person I know, and you're her world. I don't deserve you, but I'll spend what's left of me trying to earn it. I'm sorry, Ethan. She sealed them both in a new envelope, scrawling for Liam, 18th birthday on the front, then locked it in her desk drawer. Her phone buzzed breaking news. Marshall Dynamics assets seized. Ex-CEO Ethan Marshall under investigation. She shut it off, padding to Liam's room. He slept surrounded by books, cardiac surgery diagrams. A physics primer. Clara had sent his dinosaur tucked under his arm. Some choices echo forever, she whispered, brushing his curls. But you're my best one. The next morning, she scrubbed in for a surgery, a toddler with a valve defect, routine but delicate. The oar was her sanctuary, the scalpel an extension of her hand. She didn't think about Ethan, didn't let his plea seep in. He'd made his bed, she'd built a life. But as she stitched the tiny heart, a flicker of doubt crept up. What if Liam asked someday? What if he wanted to know? She pushed it down, focusing on the monitor's steady beep. One fight at a time. Rain tapped a steady rhythm against the windows of their queen and apartment. The Seattle skyline a blurry smear of gray and gold beyond the glass. Abby sat at the kitchen table, Her laptop opened to a draft of her latest surgical paper, a technique for minimally invasive valve repairs in kids, already making waves at conferences. Across the room, Liam sprawled on the rug, now 6 years old, his dark curls wild as he pieced together a 200-piece puzzle of the human heart. At his age, most kids were mastering shape sorters. Liam was mapping ventricles like it was a game. "Mommy, look," he called, holding up the completed puzzle, his grin all dimples and pride. "Took me 12 minutes. That's my genius," Abby said, smiling as she highlighted a line in her notes. "Try the brain one next, it's trickier." He scampered to his toy chest, and Abby turned back to her work, the soft clatter of puzzle pieces a comforting hum. 3 years had passed since the Silicon Valley showdown, since Ethan's fall, Clara's death, the letters locked away in her desk. She'd built a life brick by brick, a steady job at Seattle Children's, a modest home, a reputation as a pediatric surgery rock star. Liam was her world, brilliant and bold, untouched by the shadow of his father. The TV droned in the background, a news anchor's voice cutting through. Crawford Dynamics stock plummets amid divorce rumors. Sources confirm ex-CEO Ethan Marshall and Vivian Lee have separated. Rachel, lounging on the couch with a medical journal, muted it fast, but not before Abby stiffened, her pen freezing mid-sentence. "It's fine," she said, waving Rachel off before she could speak. "Margaret called last week, told me it was coming." Rachel sat up, eyebrows shooting up. "You're taking her calls now?" Abby shrugged, eyes on her screen. "She sends Liam books, smart ones, engineering stuff. He loves them." "The shares?" Rachel asked, lowering her voice. 15%, Abby confirmed, quieter still. "Another year, maybe 2, and we'll have leverage." Liam popped up at her elbow, clutching the brain puzzle box. "Help, Mommy?" he asked, dropping it on the table with a thud. "Take a break," Rachel urged, tossing her journal aside. "That paper can wait." Abby checked her watch. 3 hours till her next surgery. "Okay, buddy," she said, ruffling his hair. "Show me what you've got." They spread the pieces on the living room floor, Liam sorting them with surgical precision, edges first, then colors. Abby's phone buzzed, a message from Johns Hopkins. "We'd like you to present your valve technique at our conference next month." Her heart leapt, but before she could reply, Liam spoke, his voice cutting through the quiet. "Mommy, why doesn't Daddy live with us?" The room froze. Abby's breath caught, her hand hovering over a puzzle piece. Rachel's eyes widened, darting between them. Liam pointed at the muted TV, where Ethan's face lingered on a news loop, older, haggard, but unmistakable. "Like my picture," he said, matter of fact, and Abby's chest tightened. He'd found Ethan's photo online months ago, tucked it into his favorite book, a Marshall Dynamics annual report Clara had sent. She'd brushed it off then, but now. "Yeah," she managed, her voice a whisper. "Like your picture." Liam nodded, thoughtful, then went back to his puzzle. "Need more gray pieces," he muttered, oblivious to the bomb he'd dropped. Rachel slid off the couch, kneeling beside her. "You okay?" she mouthed. Abby shook her head, forcing a smile. "Later," she mouthed back, her mind racing. He'd asked before, little questions, easily dodged, but this was different. Direct, pointed, and she didn't have an answer ready. That night, after Liam was asleep, Abby unlocked her desk drawer, pulling out the envelope marked for Liam, 18th birthday. Ethan's letter sat inside, its creases deeper now, a weight she'd avoided for years. She hadn't read it since that night he'd begged in the lobby, but Liam's question echoed in her skull, loud as a siren. She slid it open, the paper rustling in the silence. "Liam, I'm your dad, and I failed you before you were born. I chose wrong, money, power, things that don't matter now. Your mom's the strongest person I know, and you're her world. I don't deserve you, but I'll spend what's left of me trying to earn it. I'm sorry, Ethan." Her hands shook, tears blurring the ink. She'd kept Ethan out, protected Liam from the mess, but what if he needed more? What if he deserved to know, not at 18 but now? Rachel found her there, curled on the couch, the letter in her lap. He asked, "Didn't he?" She said, settling beside her with a mug of tea. "Yeah," Abby said, wiping her eyes. out of nowhere. I didn't know what to say. He's 6 going on 60, Rachel said, sipping her tea. He's gonna keep asking. I know. Abby folded the letter, her voice thick. But how do I tell him his dad walked out before he was born? That he picked a company over us? You don't have to tell him everything, Rachel said. Just enough. He's smart, he'll figure out the rest when he's ready. Abby leaned back, staring at the ceiling. I thought I could keep it locked away till he was older. But he's already digging. Kid's a detective, Rachel said, nudging her. Blame Clara, she gave him that brain. Abby laughed, soft and shaky. Yeah. And mine too, I guess. The next morning, she sat Liam down at the kitchen table. A plate of pancakes between them, his favorite. A bribe to soften the blow. He dug in, syrup smearing his chin, while she searched for words. Liam, she started, her hands clasped tight. You asked about Daddy yesterday. He nodded, swallowing a bite. The man on TV. He looks like me. He does, she said, her throat tight. He's your dad. His name's Ethan. But he had to go away a long time ago, before you were born. He made a choice and I made one too, I chose you. Liam frowned, processing. Why'd he go? He thought something else was more important, she said, keeping it simple. But I stayed because you're the most important thing to me. He poked at his pancake, quiet for a long stretch. Does he like puzzles? The question threw her, and she laughed, tears prickling. He used to. Not as good as you, though. Liam grinned, satisfied, and went back to eating. Abby exhaled, the weight lifting just a little. It wasn't the whole story, but it was a start. Enough for now. Later, as she scrubbed in for her surgery, she made a silent promise. She'd tell him more when he asked again. For now, she'd keep building puzzle by puzzle, heart by heart, until he was ready for the rest. The auditorium at Seattle Children's Hospital buzzed with anticipation. A sea of white coats and tuxedos packed into rows under warm stage lights. Abby stood backstage, smoothing the emerald green gown that hugged her frame, her hands steady despite the flutter in her chest. It was the annual gala, and tonight, the new Clara Marshall Center for Pediatric Innovation would be unveiled, a gleaming wing funded by her grants and Liam's trust. At 9 years old, Liam stood beside her, tugging at his tiny tuxedo tie, his dark curls tamed for once. Ready, buddy? She whispered, kneeling to his level. Ready, Dr. Mommy, he said, serious as ever, making her laugh. Photographers nearby cooed, snapping shots of the pair, Seattle's medical darling and her prodigy son. The MC's voice boomed through the speakers, and the Pioneer in Pediatric Surgery Award goes to Dr. Abigail Harper. The crowd erupted, a standing ovation rolling over them as Abby took Liam's hand and stepped onto the stage. The spotlight caught them both, her gown shimmering, his tux a miniature mirror of the room's elite. She adjusted the mic, her voice clear and strong. 3 years ago, I stood at a different podium talking about tiny hearts, how they heal, how they grow. Tonight, I want to talk about bigger ones, the ones that keep beating despite everything. Her eyes found Liam, vibrating with excitement beside her. My new valve technique has saved thousands of kids. But the real strength comes from the parents who trust me, and from this guy right here, my son, Liam, who's taught me more about courage than any textbook ever could. The crowd murmured, a warm ripple of awe. Liam stepped forward, right on cue, holding the crystal award with careful hands. Congratulations, Dr. Mommy, he said into the mic, his voice piping through the hall. Laughter and applause followed, loud and bright. But he wasn't done. And he added, glancing at her with a grin, I've got news too. I got accepted to the gifted medical program. Gasps broke out. The program was for high schoolers, not a 9-year-old. Abby hugged him tight, tears pricking her eyes as the room roared. That's right, baby, she said, loud enough for the mic to catch. We'll fix those hearts together. Later, at the reception, the ballroom glittered with champagne flutes and chatter. Liam darted off, charming a cluster of surgeons with a shockingly accurate rundown of aortic anatomy. Rachel sidled up, resplendent in blue, nudging Abby with a grin. He's gone again, she said, nodding toward the exit. Abby followed her gaze. Ethan, slipping in late, lingering by the back wall. No suit tonight, just a plain jacket and jeans. His face lined with years she hadn't seen up close. He'd aged a decade since the lobby plea, his redemption tour through Asia's children's hospitals etched into his skin. Their eyes met briefly, a silent thread stretching across the room. Then she looked away. "Good," she said, sipping her water. "Let him watch." He looked stunned. Rachel added, smirking. "Seeing Liam up there must have hit him hard. Reminded him what he walked away from." Abby said, her voice ice. "He made his choice." Liam raced back, tugging her sleeve. "Mommy, Dr. Chun says I can see the MRI machines tomorrow. Did you thank him?" she asked, pulling him onto her lap. "Yes, and I asked about the coils like you taught me." He launched into a spiel about magnetic resonance, and Abby breathed him in syrup and soap, her anchor in the storm. Across the room, Ethan hovered by the new plaque Clara Marshall Center, his fingers brushing his mother's name. Abby caught it from the corner of her eye, a flicker of something softening her resolve. She gave him the slightest nod. He returned it, then slipped out into the night. "Mommy, fish tank time?" Liam asked, snapping her back. "Soon, baby," she said, kissing his forehead. A nurse hurried over, breathless. "Dr. Harper, emergency case, incoming valve rupture. We need you." Abby glanced at Rachel, who was already reaching for Liam. "Go," Rachel said. "We'll handle the fish. Save the tiny heart." "Mommy," Liam called as she stood, and her own swelled, fierce and full. The surgical board buzzed the next morning. Gossip swirling. Ex-CEO spotted at gala. Leaves early. Abby ignored it, scrubbing in for the emergency case, a 5-year-old. Stable now thanks to her hands. She was mid-notes when Rachel handed her a clipping. Former tech CEO volunteers at children's hospitals in Singapore. She tucked it away, no comment. Weeks later, at the Johns Hopkins conference in Baltimore, Abby presented her technique to a packed hall. Liam beside her in a tiny lab coat. They toured the aquarium after, his laughter echoing off the glass as sharks swam overhead. Ethan was there too, same conference, different stage, picking up an innovation award for some startup. Baltimore was big enough they didn't cross paths. Back in Seattle, the Clara Marshall Center opened its doors, Liam's name on a small plaque beneath. Dr. Liam Harper, youngest certified medical researcher. His valve design sketched at 7, refined at 8, tested at 9, promised to change lives. Abby watched him explain it to reporters, her heart full. Ethan lingered at the crowd's edge, unnoticed by most, his eyes on the son he'd never know. No words passed, none were needed. Years spun by, and Abby stood in her office, now chief of pediatric surgery, staring at a photo her and Liam at the gala, his tuxedo tie askew. Her phone buzzed. Another award, another talk. She'd lost count, but they weren't her legacy. He was 9 years ago, a positive test in a crumbling kitchen now, a boy revolutionizing medicine before he hit double digits. She passed a billboard daily, Marshall Dynamics old HQ. Now a tech ruin. Ethan's face faded under the slogan, building the future. Yes, she whispered to Liam one night, parked at the hospital, but not the future he expected. He kicked in his sleep, a silent "I'm here." Message received, little one, she said, smiling. Let's keep saving lives. Their reflection caught in the window, mother and son, white coats matching, ready to heal the world, one beating heart at a time. Abby and Liam's epic journey wraps up. What did you think of their ending? Subscribe and drop a comment. I'd love to hear your favorite moment or what you took from their story. Thanks for sticking with us. Your support made this ride amazing.